right, guys, hope you're having a good Tuesday here. So my name is Stefan Schörling. I'm based in Sweden as well. I run the Swedish System Center user group. And if you want to follow me on Twitter or my blog, it's free to use. So just go ahead and do that. So I want to address some security stuff today. And first off, we're going to talk about Windows Defender. So before we go into that, I want to show you this map. Some of you may have seen it before, but this is a typical way how attackers get into the networks today. And so it often starts with an email coming in. There's an attachment, the end user clicks on it, and that's either calling a web browser or running a program, and an exploit gets installed on the machine, and the attack goes on. So if we look on the chain here, what we're going to start with is Defender, what's actually on the box. So those are kind of the things we're going to cover in the first part, and the second part is the latter part of Windows Defender ATP, which has a license to it. So, all right. So to start off, we have the intelligent security graph. Microsoft has a lot of services. They're gathering all the data and telemetry from them, and all of license activations, failed logons, and so on. This data they're feeding into something they call the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph, and that is something we can reuse in the Defender product later on, which I'm going to show you. So all of this data, I think it's around 10 terabytes a day they have, and so they apply some fancy machine learning and AI and stuff on it, and find some malicious patterns, and we can leverage that. So just setting the stage on what the ISG is. So let's jump into pre-breach. And what is this Defender thingy? Well, it started a way long back ago with the System Center Essentials and the Home Free product, and they got a really good usage on the home market. And then they started adding it to Vista and so on. It wasn't really that good in the beginning. They had lots of challenges in all the tests that were out there, and that was a kind of a challenging, because a lot of security people who used other AVs, they kind of, oh, Defender sucks, we're never going to use that, and that stamp still is in there with many customers you meet. But if you actually look at the facts and the tests that's been conducted over the last years, the score is really high when we talk about Defender. They're top scoring. They get the top results on the AV tests and the AV comparative tests out there. So they've really shaped up, and the kind of the success around that has been around that they kind of moved from a mainly signature based to a more applying more machine learning. So which we're going to go into. All right, so some components of Windows Defender, and that also another thing. Defender is often compared with other endpoint security solutions, which have a lot of features. So from a branding perspective, a lot of features have been bumped into the Defender stack, so which is called now Windows Defender. So the three first ones are, of course, the anti-malware engine. And then they actually added the Windows Firewall, which they call the network firewall, in the stack, just to be able to compare against other vendors when they talk about endpoint security. And then there's a feature called potentially unwanted software. On top of that, they've added something called network protection, which is a network protection layer, which I'm going to show you later. Ransomware protection, or control folder access, it's also known as. Exploit protection, which is a feature coming from EMET, Enhanced Mitigation and Enhancement Toolkit, if you have seen that before. So that's actually built in now. And then they added attack surface reduction, which is a layer where you can reduce the attack vectors on your machines. And then they have application guard and application control. Jürgen mentioned earlier the application guard, where you can actually run Edge in an isolated mode, and the add-ins for the others. And then on top of that, we have the Defender ATP, or called EDR solution. And that's what we're going to cover in the second piece. So let's move into the features here. And first, we have the cloud delivered protection and the automatic sample submission, also called that block at first sight. So if you enable this, you can actually share data with Microsoft or if sample files, and that is actually moved into a machine learning model, and you can actually get feedback and quick decisions. So it should be able to block if the files are malicious in a certain time period. This previously was called something which was not really that good, but now it's called Maps. So join Microsoft Maps. But previously it was called Microsoft SpyNet, and that kind of made a lot of customers resistant from joining this service, and we're still seeing that with some customers where they're resistant and enabling this because it used to be called Microsoft SpyNet. But yeah, you really need to use this if you're going to get the good results on Defender. So that is kind of one of the key elements that you need to have. Then when it's coming to the machine learning parts, so if we have the patient 0 and all the other clients after that, so if they find a malicious file on the machine which they can't determine, it's sent up to the cloud. Then they get a response within the time frame you set, how fast you want to have the response. I think the default is 30 or 60 seconds, I can't remember, or milliseconds. And if it hasn't got a reply back, it's sending another saying, oh, do an analysis of this one. It's still unknown. It's getting a too low score. It's sending it up to unknown prediction, and then it's sending back, and then it's actually shipping it off to detonation chamber up there in the cloud. And then it's kind of analyzing the file further and more thorough. And then if it gets an answer that it's a malware, the patient next one should get a block action. So the first one will actually get infected, but the second client shouldn't get the infection. So this is kind of a feature to be able to secure machines much faster. Then coming into the machine learning part. So there are actually local machine learning models on the machines running now if you run Defender. So and they're cloud-based, so they're kind of built in the cloud, and then the machine downloads them, and then they run some CPU stuff on your machine, and they actually do machine learning locally. So there are different levels of them, and this kind of iterates to the screen going back, and go further. And then if we look at the machine learning, this is kind of the types of attributes they're looking at. So the behavior, if they're doing any specific API calls, if there's any similarities with other malwares out there, so they're kind of fuzzing the hashes. So if they kind of find common patterns in them from a previous known AV, or as you see, we've seen some of the AVs out there, they have like A, B, and C, so it's kind of different iterations of the same file. And today, I think it's over 98% of the AVs are polymorphic today, so they actually change. So a signature model doesn't really apply that well, because the signature would only find this exact same file. But with the polymorphic, the malwares are actually changing on the fly when they run on the machine. So the signature is not really efficient. And here are some other file names, file sizes, entropy level, attributes, and so on. So this is stuff they throw into the machine learning model and apply. And then they have different machine learning models. Some are manual, which they are operated by security researchers at Microsoft. Some are purely kind of data driven. So they have a few different trees they're running here. And we've actually had some challenges with some of our customers on this, where we have had false positives. But where we had to work with the Microsoft support, where their machine models were actually applying on the customer's files which they were generating. So, but we opened a support case, and that worked smoothly with Microsoft support. So if you run into that, just open a support case and be persistent. That's the advice I can give you there on that. So machine learning again, here we come back to the intelligent security graph. They take a lot of data they get from the intelligent security graph and feed into machine learning. So just understand the correlation in between them. Right, a new feature here, which is called the Sandbox. So now a guy called Tavi Sumandi at the Google Project Zero, he's a security researcher who has found a lot of security holes in Defender and its definitions. So it was actually him driving Microsoft to do this. So they actually now can run the antivirus engine as a sandbox on the machine. And if you run this command, you should be able to enable it manually. And they're starting to roll this out on 1903 and sampling it. So some 1903 machines you may see have this this sandboxing run, and that's reducing the attack vector. So if a malicious hacker is actually gaining access to the AV engine, it should run in a sandbox, and you should be able, it should be harder to kind of get out of that sandbox and do infect other stuff on the machine. If we look at customers today, it's their machines are in somewhat extent they're very locked down, and then they introduced a third-party AV or third-party management solutions, and that could actually be introducing more risk to the machines that it's so locked down. So today attackers are actually moving into more of the management tools instead of using, as we're locking down the system. So they're finding new ways, and that's why it's really important for the sandbox here to take a further step on the enhancements. Then we have the network firewall, which is the normal Windows firewall, nothing fancy, just have it here for reference. And then we have a feature here called potentially unwanted applications. And this is a feature where you can actually block unwanted like ad blockers or the Yahoo toolbars or whatever is kind of classified as the malicious intent. I know there's been some versions of VNC and stuff that's been blocked out there, which are known to be unsecure. So this is a feature you can turn on. You can either do GPO or your desired management tool. We can look at that further as well. Another feature is the network protection. So this is leveraging the intelligent security graph. So from the intelligent security graph, the client gets a list of URLs or IP addresses that are known to be malicious. Could be botnets or so on. So if you enable this, set the MP preference, enable network protection, and turn it on by enabled, it's actually blocking connections from any process to any of the malicious IP addresses. So this can be when you're moving to like a zero trust network, this can be really beneficial to have like a protection on the device itself, and this covers all the processes you have on the machine. Ransomware protection, or even called control folder access. So this actually came up when the WannaCry and the other ransomwares were really high. And what it does, it's that it's blocking machines from, or processes from renaming machines or renaming files, sorry, which are not either Microsoft signed or on your trusted list. So here as an admin, you need to take care of that. I'm going to show you that in a while. And then we have a feature called exploit protection, which is the emmet feature, which is kind of controlling control flow guard and DEP settings and so on. This is on by default, but if you want to customize it, you have to export an XML file and deploy that with your desired management tool. And under program settings, you can do exclusions for certain files. Locking this down too hard can typically cause applications to crash or not be able to run. So this is something you need to really be in control of and be careful about, especially if you have own developed software which are not up to date. So this could require recompiling of the software and so on. Another feature which is called the attack surface reduction. It is a feature to reduce attack surface reductions or attack surfaces on the machine. So in Sweden, there was a known case. There were 700 companies were hacked. And the way the attackers did it was that they sent an email with a Word file, and the Word file consisted of macro. And when the user executed the Word file, the macro was executed, and the PowerShell commandlet was calling a backdoor at the hackers. And with this attack surface reduction, there are features you can actually block this behavior. So if you have a Word file, it's not allowed to spawn other processes and so on. And there's 15 different settings you can configure for this today. And this is kind of a really good way of of reducing your attack surface. So this is kind of the stack we have when it comes to the AV. So let's move over to some demo. We can get in here. All right, let's see here what we have. So first off, we have the Defender client on the machine, of course. The new UI in 1903, it's a bit reduced. All the settings you have, ransomware and so on. If you want to enable features on machines, you can use the get MP or just see the status of it. Get the MP preferences, and here you have all the settings. This is a good way of actually verifying if policies are applying, if you're running GPOs or if you're running configuration managers to set the policies. This is kind of a good partial commandlet to run on your machine. So if we want to enable some of the features, we can do that in different stages. Let's move over to the other machine. Here we have it. So we have policies in SCCM. So if you want to create an exploit guard policy, this brings up a wizard for us where we can actually configure the different features. So attack surface reduction, control folder access, exploit protection, or network protection. So let's do just the attack surface reduction in this case. So this gives you a UI of the different features we can enable. So if you want to do exclusions, you can do that here. There are some processes that are actually triggering on some of these, like the Google Chrome updater is triggering for LSAS access and so on. So when you first enable this, my suggestion is that you start with the audit mode. So enabling audit mode on these features will give you reporting of it. So what will happen then is that if when you, then we'll just move back to the other machine, enable this, go into the event viewer. So in this case, I have created some custom views for the different features. So all reporting is locally, so it will end up here in the local events of the machine. So if I, for instance, enable the network protection, set MP preference, enable okay, and then I go to a web page here. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's a demo page for Windows Defender, so you can actually test all the features out and make sure that they're working. So if we go, in this case, to the network protection piece, we can go here, and then they have a test site for it, and we click on it, and it should actually, okay, so we have that. It's actually SmartScreen blocking us, but if we go into the network protection, so in this case, you see that it's reporting 954. This process is actually trying to communicate with this one. In this case, we had set it to audit mode. If we would set it to enabled, it would actually block the TCP connection at all, so it wouldn't be possible to connect to that. And this can be done for everything that's coming through the intelligent security graph. The challenge with this one is that there's no way for us to whitelist URLs or IP addresses if it would be the case that we're actually communicating with it. There has been some false positives, but Microsoft have solved them really quickly. But this is a really good way of kind of adding the security to your devices from a network perspective, blocking them from communicating with botnets and so on. And this works wherever they are. I mean, from the inside, you could usually use your corporate firewall, but if we look at the zero trust model where clients are always roaming in on the internet, we kind of have the challenge to maintain that, and then the endpoint itself would actually take care of this. The challenge with this is the reporting is locally. If we want to get control of this, we either have to use the Defender ATP product to get centralized reporting in the ATP console, or if your machines are connected to the network, you can actually leverage something called event forwarding. So the machines, the client machines are sending this to a central server where you will see the forwarded events, and those forwarded events you can actually then ship off to another source. If you want to use Azure Log Analytics, or if you want to ship it off to a SQL database, you can copy those events with a PowerShell script to a SQL database, for an instance, and then build some reporting on it. If it's SSRS or Power BI, you can build your kind of free reporting of it. Otherwise, you're bound of the local reporting, because this is not sent into the normal Defender anti-malware reporting which you have in System Center or Operations Manager. So, okay. So let's see, what else do we have? So the attack surface reduction, we can do that from the from a GPO as well. Another way, we have the domain controller here. So in this case, I've configured the attack surface reduction rules here. And they are, when you do it on a GPO, you need to do it with the GUIDs, and then if you want to enable it or audit mode, it's either 0, 1, or 2, how you want to configure that. If you look at the documentation of it, you see there you have the block executable content from an email client and webmail, so that would give you an attack reduction there. Office application from creating executable content, creating child processes, which is kind of that case I was talking about earlier. What you need when you enable this, you need to be careful, because sometimes you have custom macros or custom developed Office add-ins, and that could potentially break this. So when you roll it out, make sure you have an audit mode enabled, and then review the logs and see if you need to either whitelist anything or even actually remove some of these protections. There are a feature called Block Adobe Reader for creating shell processes, and the Office communication ones, which are new, which came in, I think it was 1809 Windows 10 version. So not every version is working backwards on all the Win 10 features. And I think there is an exception here from a licensing perspective, that actually these two that came in 1809, in some article it says it require an E5 license or the Windows Defender ATP license to be able to use them. So that's something you need to verify with your license partner, and I haven't done that. This one here, block process creations originating from PSXX and VMI commands. This is something you're not allowed to run when you run Configuration Manager, because if you enable this, you're going to break your Configuration Manager client. So make sure you do not enable this this one, and that is clearly stated in the documentation further down. Then if we look at the exploit protection, so this is the Emmet, and here you have the default settings. If you want to do exclusions, you do that under program settings and do specific for a specific exe file or process. And then when you're done with that configuration, you do an export of this XML file, and then you can use this settings file and actually use that one to deploy to your clients, so you have the same configuration everywhere which you want to have. But be careful with this one, because it can break. Thorough testing is very important, as normal. Okay, let's see if we can move back to some slides. Okay, so then we have Application Guard, which Jürgen mentioned earlier. So this is isolated mode, so you can actually run Edge in an isolated mode, and it shouldn't interact with the rest of the operating system. And this is pretty cool. It although requires 8 gigs of RAM in a minimum, so not all your machines may be able to run it. But it's something going forward, and it's something they've kind of explored on and working harder on to do more isolations and Sandbox. And you may have seen the Windows Sandbox, and that's also a feature that is out there to run. Then we have the extensions for Chrome and Firefox, which Jürgen demoed earlier. So if you have other browsers, you can actually redirect them to the Edge one. So this is a really good one. Was announced 2 months ago, I think. So fairly new. Then we have many of you may have heard of Device Guard, and that was kind of tough to implement. So they actually moved over to the application control, which is a way where only trusted or signed applications are be able to run, and you can configure that in different modes. As you see on the right screen there, you actually can authorize software that is trusted by the intelligent security graph again, so you reduce the amount of time you have to do signing and so on. And this is something you could leverage for certain use cases where you have kind of control hardware, you really know what's on there. So a kiosk machine, for an instance, so you would kind of block execution of malicious code in a smart way, so kind of reducing the attack vector again. So it's a really nice feature. Then we have SmartScreen at the end here. So this is also protecting the barrier. So instead of stuff coming in, we have the Defender's SmartScreen, which is kind of an app reputation, blocking URLs, and we can actually leverage some of this data in ATP. So we can actually do reporting on this data in Windows Defender ATP. So if you have machines that have been kind of clicked, bypass the Defender SmartScreen, you can get the reporting there. So it has a nice integration with that. So that's kind of the client side. There's a lot of stuff. The thing here is that every new Win 10 version is getting new features. And what we're seeing with our customers is they're not haven't been able or haven't had the time or haven't realized that they can actually add these new security features that are coming in through the new Windows 10 versions. So there in 1809, there came a lot of new features. And so on. So going back to the stack here, what we have is the sorry for the browsing here. Let's do like that. So what is enterprise ready today? That's almost a question we get a lot. I would say network protection, if you live with a caveat where you can't do the whitelisting, that is really good. Ransomware protection has some challenges when it comes to whitelisting, which is a feature where kind of all Microsoft signed apps and some apps you kind of whitelist are able to rename files. It's a lot of work to whitelist all the apps you have, and there are some challenges when it comes to the variables where you can do the parameters of what to whitelist and folders to include and exclude and so on. So that needs some more work in my opinion, but you can start running it in audit mode and see what you get there. Exploit protection for sure in certain scenarios, and make sure you do that. Attack surface reduction definitely is ready. You just need to be cautious when you roll it out. So I start off in audit mode and do that. And then application guard and application control is also out there with the caveat. So I mean, if you haven't implemented, start looking at them. It really adds value, and they are free to use from what's built in the Windows 10 stack. All right, that's what I had for the first piece. So let's swap over to the second part. Bear with me here. All right, guys, I am still Stefan, and we're going to jump into the Microsoft Defender ATP, which is an E5 SKU, requires a license. And the E5 SKU for Windows 10 you can buy in different ways, either through the Microsoft 365 license, you can buy it through the threat protection license, or you can actually buy it as a standalone license as well. So there are different ways of acquiring this, but it's in the ground. It's a Windows 10 E5, and then you can find different ways of getting it. So if we go back to this overview of the pre and post breach, so this product or EDR solution is really around when something has happened. It's not so much about the protection, it's more from the detection level if you look on the NIST security framework. So this is what happened, how did it happen, and where did it happen. So that's kind of the things we can get with this one. From a protect perspective, it gives you a lot of insights on how your things are configured. So we're going to look at that. So it's going to give you advice on how to improve your security posture, things you can change, and so on. But it's really an EDR solution. If you want to, what I typically advise my customers, if you spend money on an AV today, like any of the third parties, you shouldn't do that anymore. If you're a Windows shop and you run mainly Windows, I would advise you to do Defender and take the money you spent on that and use that on an EDR solution, because that's really where you need to put your money in. Because the threats today are so advanced, so it's fairly simple if you want to bypass any of the AVs out there. And this is kind of what you need to see the malicious activities going on here, and this kind of gives you the detect capability. It's not certainly protecting, but it will give you an indication that something weird is going on here and you need to take action at it. So recently the Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection was renamed to be Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. And this includes a bunch of features. So from the left, we have Threat and Vulnerability Management, the TVM solution, which is actually giving you insights on vulnerable software or vulnerable configurations in your environment. We have the reporting of the attack surface reduction, which I was speaking of earlier. We have a next generation protection, the endpoint detection and response. We have investigation and remediation and orchestration in some extent, where we can actually orchestrate and automate things. And then there's a feature called the Microsoft Threat Experts, which is managed service for Microsoft, where you can actually get second opinions from Microsoft. If you see something weird, you can actually ship it off to the threat experts, and they can review and get back to you with an answer. So we see this as malicious, you should do this and that. And that is an added service on top of the license. So it's not included, you have to buy an extra license for this one. Then we look on the platform side. Recently, they actually announced the Mac client. So we have Windows, we're covering the Windows server, we're covering Mac now with the native protection. So we actually get an AV and an EDR solution for Mac now with the, if we get ATP. And the Linux offering is still today, it's a third-party play, so you can use any of the third parties out there who can leverage with a Windows Defender ATP. We have Siftem, for example, we have SentinelOne, Bitdefender, who can integrate their Linux offerings into this. I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft is working on a Linux agent, as we have 50% of the machines in Azure running Linux, but today it's a third-party play. And this is something to look out for. But today we have Windows and Mac natively. If we want to go with Linux today, we buy a third-party vendor and integrate that to Defender ATP. Well, this is a brief overview of the the Mac agent for ATP. So AV, and here they're going to work on more features for the capabilities on the Mac agent. So TVM dashboard, I think it's better for us to go in and look at it. So let's jump into it directly. I'll swap over here to the browser. So this is Microsoft Defender Security Center. So you log on by going to securitycenter.windows.com. So what this gives you, it gives you a dashboard on your overall posture, the active alerts, the active automated investigations, users at risk, machines and the dashboard on the different versions we have. So to onboard a machine to Defender ATP, first we need to set up a tenant. So if we go to settings here, when you start up, you'll have to select your storage, where you want to save the data. If you want to have it in US, UK, or Europe, most of our customers select Europe. And then you have to set a data retention time. So 180 days is the longest you can actually save the data. So the data is stored in different layers here, but the overall data is 180 days. And then some data is actually only stored in 30 days, which is the really rich data where you can do hunting on. And then to onboard a machine, you go to machine management and onboarding. You select your operating system. So if you run Windows 7 or if you run 8.1, you can actually download an agent for that. But when it comes to Windows 10 and the Windows Server 2016 or it's 1803 or 2019, it's actually built in. So you just enable an agent that is underneath, built into the OS, and enable that one. So Win 10, then you select the different onboarding methods you want to do. You can onboard via group policy, SCCM. If you do MDM or Intune, you can do that, or then you have VDI scenarios as well. So in this case, I've done the local script. Let's see what we have here. Downloads, maybe the wrong VM didn't help. Let's go to the right one. So downloads, Windows Defender ATP onboarding package, and here we have a CMD file. So run this one in an elevated command prompt. So let's do this. Right click, run as an administrator. Just for demo purposes, you click yes, and then you'll get a confirmation that the machine has been onboarded. It's going to take a few minutes. It's typically around 3 minutes before a machine shows up. I've done this already for this machine, so we're not going to go through that. And then you have some configurations here. There are some cool stuff here under advanced features, which you may want to be aware of. So here we have integration with, if you're running Cloud App Security, or if you're running Azure Information Protection, or are running Office 365, you can actually, or Azure ATP for the matter, you can enable integration in between them. So they start exchanging data in between the services. So for an example, if we get an email from O365, that is malicious, that can actually share that data with ATP, so we can see it in the console that this machine received an email that was malicious. Or if we do Cloud App Security and want to run Cloud App Discovery, which some customers want to know what cloud apps they use. So natively in Windows 10 1809, they had a feature where the telemetry data was actually shared with the Cloud App Discovery. So you can actually see what cloud apps these machines are using without using any other connectors to your proxies or firewalls. It's the client natively sending that data to Defender ATP, which then shares it with Cloud App Security, and we can get a cloud discovery dashboard. So we can see here which apps the machines are using. And in April, this was backported to earlier versions. So from 1709 and above, we can actually get this data now. So it doesn't have to be, 1709. So it doesn't have to be the 1809 version. So now we get the Windows 10 endpoint users, and we get a report of the Win 10 devices automatically without using a proxy or centralized. So it's cloud native. That is really, really great, because when users are out roaming, we typically don't see that data when they do travel, because it doesn't go through a proxy and so on. So, but now we get that data as well. So really, really good stuff. We can build roles and machine groups. If we want to separate server teams and client teams, we can do that, or Linux for the matter. So we can kind of build roles and responsibilities for different teams to work on it. Then we have a CM solution here. We can actually integrate to a CM solution where if there are alerts generated, we may have Splunk or ArcSight or any of the others. We can actually ship the alerts off to the CM solution, so we integrate in that way. So going back here to the dashboards. So we have the security operations one, which I mentioned earlier. And then we have the secure score one. So the secure score is something you may have seen in other products, but with secure score and Defender ATP, we're integrating the Windows features as well. So here we're getting assessment of the, if we configure credential guard on machines, we have BitLocker running and so on. So we can kind of get an overview of how that is looking. And then something really cool here is the threat analytics. I've used to work a lot with SCCM, and what typically happens is the security departments come, how are our machines patched against this RDP vulnerability, or how many of our machines are running BitLocker, or how many machines are doing this, how many. So with this, we have threat analytics where Microsoft is feeding and building a threat feed for you for recent vulnerabilities you have. So we have the wormable RCE vulnerability in RDP, which came out just a few weeks ago. So they actually build a threat feed here. What's the summary, the key insights to know, what are the mitigations we can apply, how can we detect, and how can we use hunting? How can we actually detect if someone is using this in our environment? And then we can actually see a status out there to the right. How many machines are mitigated? How many are unmitigated? In this case, I do not have any vulnerable machines or any Windows 7 machines. So it doesn't show up here. But if we take any of the others, we should be able to find Spectre, for an example. The Spectre and Meltdown. We get the same thing here and we see how many are mitigated, unmitigated, and we see a graph over time how our environment has evolved, if we're actually improving our security posture, if we're getting it worse. So this is really valuable for many of the security and IT departments out there. So once the machines are onboarded, they will start listening and detecting on things. What Microsoft is doing is, instead of getting, if you look at this view, the alerts queue, which is all of the alerts, everything that is kind of malicious. If it's like 3 alerts that are on one machine that can be correlated together, they build that up to an incident instead. So you actually can work with an incident. We have 38, which is a ransomware incident. So you can kind of work with the incident instead of having like an alert storm. So the incidents is the purpose of that. The machine list is a list of machines we have which are installed and actively running. So we can take the, let's see if we find here, CL1. Maybe it was that name, no. So this is a machine I installed yesterday with 1903. So I can go into this machine and look into details. I have a timeline, everything that this machine has done, CMD that were created, all the IP addresses, everything it has communicated with, all the websites and so on. And this is data is stored, this is the detailed data that is stored for 30 days. So you typically can't see longer than 30 days for this detailed data. Then we have the security recommendations. So here we get recommendations on things we need to improve. If it's GPOs or security features we should turn on. Then we go over to the software inventory. So this hasn't reported that much yet because it's a vanilla Win 10 machine. And then we have discovered vulnerabilities that would show, let's do another machine instead. So this one is a bit worse. It has some custom command and control machines. You see a timeline on what's going on. Security recommendations, a few more things we need to enable here. And then we have the discovered vulnerabilities. It's actually showing what's vulnerable. In this case, it's the GeForce NVIDIA drivers that are vulnerable, which should be updated 10 days ago. So it's giving us third-party features even to kind of get that data. So if there is an incident on this machine and we want to dig in deeper to it, we have a few options here. We can collect an investigation package, which is gathering data from the machine, taking all the startup parameters and what processes are running and so on. So it's giving you a zip file you'll be able to download with kind of a metadata of the machine, what process we're running, what's in auto start, what are the typical kind of attack vectors. So it will give you a good sense of when you do an investigation of the machine, what could have happened. We can run an AV scan from here as well, but we can restrict app execution. So what this means, you can only run Microsoft signed apps. So it's blocking all other apps from running on the machine. And then we can do an isolation of the machine. So if I click on this one, this machine will be disconnected from communicating with all services except the Windows Defender ATP service and Skype for Business at the moment. So that would kind of isolate the botnet or something. So that's an action you can take if you find an infected machine. Okay, we need to take action. We don't want this to spread. Let's isolate the machine. And then we have something called here, initiate live response session. Let me change to another machine here. So from the console, you may have, we have a lot of machines, but a new feature that is in preview now is the live response. So what this does, it's actually connecting to the machine out there via reverse shell. So let's see if we can actually get it to respond. Apparently it's taking some time. Here we go. Since IR running and registered, and here we can do help. Here's a bunch of commands we can actually run. So now I have a remote shell on this machine. So if I do dir on this one, it's going to show what's on the C drive actually. So I can list files and kind of investigate the machine when it's remotely. And then I can run different persistence, for example, and that will give me some data on the machine, what types of persistent methods are on the machine, and then I can investigate that different apps have registered things. This is also going to show the legit stuff you have, so you have to parse through the data. But it's a help for you to kind of do the investigation of the machine, what's actually happening on it. And then if I run processes, it's going to show all the processes running on the machine. And then I can find, oh, this could be a malicious process which shouldn't be there, and so on. So this is a really good investigation tool when you do this. We built some custom stuff where you can upload files here. You can actually upload files to a library, and here we've done some PowerShell scripts. And if you want to build your custom DFIR, so when you do investigations, you may want to capture some other stuff, you can actually run those PowerShell scripts and send that data to wherever you want to if you haven't isolated the machine. But then you can upload and download files and kind of gather data that way. So you don't have to log on interactively to the machine. So you can actually work in the back end here to do this. So this is a really, really cool feature. Then Microsoft bought a company a few years ago. So they're actually doing some automation for you. So the low fidelity alerts. I do not have any. Let's see if I have any here. Yeah. So some of the low fidelity alerts like malwares and so on, it can actually do automated responses. So it will give you an investigation graph on where the malware was found, or was it on this machine or several machines? What are the hashes? What did it communicate? So it's instead of you doing this analysis, this has done it automatically. You can just review what's happened. Okay, this was low fidelity. With this, it was automatically remediated. So it saves time for you, because when you get these types of solutions, you're going to get alerts and incidents, which are time consuming because you need to investigate them. And with this automation, you can actually save some time and find stuff. So where you want to spend your time is more on the advanced hunting pieces. So this is all the events, those we talked about earlier, for 30 days, which machines have communicated with what and what processes did create what. So in this case, we've created some example queries here. So we have SmartScreen continue, for example. So in this case, we built a query which is querying all machines who have got a SmartScreen prompt and clicked continue. Don't get any results here, but this is kind of a type of query you can do. Firewall changes, for an instance. I do not have some machines where we added some firewall changes here. And then we can yeah, it's kind of your imagination that is setting the boundary here. So this is really for the security team to do work hard on that. Exploit guard, I think we have the reporting here, which we talked about earlier. If you want to build custom reporting of exploit guard, you can do that here. But we also have some built-in report here on the threat protections where we can follow these sources, what has been triggered and so on. Then if we talk about the interoperability, there's a lot of vendors out there that are actually integrating directly to ATP. So if you go back to my machine list here, for an example, you see my iPhone X is actually reporting back in here. And how am I doing that? I'm doing that either with Lookout or the Kurata add-in for mobile. So actually I can get hunting and investigation around my mobile devices as well as they are reporting back in through the third parties offerings out there. So that is really cool. TVM, which I spoke about earlier, threat and vulnerability management. I get an overall exposure score. What do I need to work on? Is it the network or the applications or OS? You see I have a low scores on application and OS. Maybe I should focus my efforts there. What are my vulnerable software? Oh, Python. Okay, let's put in a request to do patching of that one. Then exposure distribution on high and low and so on. So security recommendations, what I should work with to get it better, in a better state. Then we have software inventory. What apps do we have there? How vulnerable have they been over time, or the machines I have? And then I have weaknesses here, which is kind of all the CVEs which are known to the service, which are kind of we can follow and track here as well.